Good evening, everybody. Namaste to this evening's webinar. My name is Brahmachari Aditya. I'm also a medical doctor, and you must be knowing we are doing a 3-week series on health and healing. Last week, I spoke about music and how certain kinds of music is good for us. Other kinds of noise and too much talking sometimes is not good for us. And it was a very interesting topic, something we can certainly explore further. And similarly, this evening's topic is also very, very interesting. The topic is how meditation changes your brain. And with me today, the co-presenter is Dr. Amit Agarwal. He's our fellow Kriyaban and member in Pune Sangha and a very dear friend. Together, myself, he and his wife, we run a clinic called Ananda Clinic of Integrated Healthcare here in the city. So let's begin this evening with a prayer and a brief chant, and I will explain the topic further, and then Amarji will conduct the class. Let's start with a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, beloved friend God, great Gurus, beloved Guru Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we lovingly bow before you all and invoke your presence, grace and blessings in our lives. May we serve as channels for your wisdom and your love. Come to us. Let's keep our spine straight, body relaxed. Now meditate just for a few moments. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome back, friends. So, as I was mentioning, today's topic is how meditation changes our brain. And it's very interesting to contemplate that the brain, which we don't see, rightly so, it's inside our head, very well protected by nature, conducts practically all the functions of the body. The automatic activity of the heart, of the breathing system when we go to sleep, sometimes even when we faint. How is it that there is a mechanism in the body which keeps all the systems going? Also, all the different glands of the body are dependent on the brain. And today we will learn many other very interesting facets through Dr. Amit Agarwal. And I want to introduce Dr. Amit to all of you. His spiritual name is Amar, and I often call him by that name, Dr. Amar. And he's a wonderful friend of mine, very wonderful Kriyaban and devotee. We've been now in Pune together for many years. And when Kriyananda ji used to come to India, and some of you will know that Swamiji's health was very frail towards the end of his life. Amarji used to, offer consultation to Swamiji and his nurse. And he has about 15 years of experience as a physician. He's an MD doctor in modern medicine. He also has practiced homeopathy now for many years. He's self-taught and also he has consulted with many experts in that field. He's very well versed with Yoganandaji's flower essences, his teachings on health, and is enthusiastic about sharing these teachings. So let's now listen from Dr. Amar how certain parts of our brain can be affected, by certain emotions. And the brain works both ways. Our environment affects our brain, but we can also work with our brain to cause change in our environment, in our behavior, in the way we go through life, our attitudes, which are very important. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Amar and take the class from here. If you have any questions on this interesting topic, please keep sending them to us. But like I mentioned, this is an introductory class and we will follow it up with actually multiple classes on this topic itself. And also towards the end of our class today, we will have 7 to 8 minutes of experiential workshop based on what Amarji shares with us.
Hello friends, and thank you Dr. Aditya for that kind introduction. Today I'll be talking something which is not only revolutionary for all of us, but it is revolutionary for the scientific community also. As Dr. Aditya told you that I have now close to 15 to 20 years of experience in modern medicine, and when I was in medical school, some of the things which we were being taught about the brain and the functions, at that time we were taught that brain does not change beyond the age of 5 years because it has not enough elasticity and not enough remodeling capacity. But you would be amazed to know that in last 15 to 20 years, neuroscientists have observed that brain has tremendous capacity to improve and to reorganize itself. And today I'll be sharing with you some of those aspects, where we will be, talking mainly about the emotional behavior, how there are different centers in the brain of the emotional behavior, because although brain is conducting all the functions, but then today we'll be concentrating mainly about the emotional behavior. So let me draw before you one simple diagram so that you can actually see how this brain looks like when it is there in our skulls. And if I can draw a schematic diagram like this, right here in the central core of the brain towards the base, we have a center which you can say is responsible for the negative.
We have to make it big, the diagram.
We have, which is responsible for the negative emotions. So this part of the brain, which is here in the basal part and in the central part, is actually responsible for the negative emotions in our cells. You may say that this is a switch, which is when it is switched on, the negative emotions like anger, fear, some of these emotional responses are not new to us because we, in our day-to-day challenges and battle of life, we always see like how anger and fear sometimes assails us. So when this center is active, suddenly there is a current. This center is something like which works as a pre-programmed hard disk of a computer, because our brain works on the principle of learned behavior. This is because when we were in the similar situation in our previous past, we learned something and that learned behavior is kept in the hard disk as a memory. So next time when we are in a similar situation, which is somewhat similar, the neurons, which are nothing but the electrical circuits in the brain, they start firing automatically, the current starts flowing in them. As a result, there is a cascade of neurochemicals which are released, and ultimately it starts affecting all the major organs of the body. Let us say the one major organ of the body is heart. Now when this neurocascade is active. So whenever there is a response of fear and anxiety, what happens to our heart? This is our common experience. All of us know that our heart's beat becomes more faster, our heart rate increases, and our blood pressure also increases. Now, you can very well imagine, like if in the day-to-day stressful situations, if this is what is going to happen every time, what is it going to predispose us to? Because if you see, our constantly elevated heart rate and constantly elevated blood pressure will definitely increase our chances of heart attacks, which we are seeing, which has actually taken, an epidemic proportion in the whole world. So, what is the solution? And as you see that nature works on the principles of duality, just like wherever we have a negative, we always have a positive aspect just besides it. And in our brain is also, not separate from the nature. So just close to this negative center, we have a positive switch also in our brain, which nature has provided us. And this area, which we'll be talking in detail a little further, is actually close to our forehead, and medically speaking, this area is known as a prefrontal cortex. If you see in this part of the head, this is the area I'm talking, and exactly opposite this area in the brain is our prefrontal cortex, and this is the positive switch which nature has provided us in our brains. And when this is active, the emotional, the feelings are always positive, and what we experience is actually calmness, we experience joy, we are more creative, we have more solutions, and the list goes on increasing. I will not be taking up the whole advantages of this positive switch, but then there is a inverse relationship. The one more thing which scientists have observed is that there is an inverse relationship between this positive center as well as this negative center, because when one is active, the other calms down automatically. So with this background, now let me take you beyond, because the topic for today is that how meditation can change our brain. So if this is the positive center, there are many ways by which this positive center can be activated, and we'll be talking of some of these things at the end of our talk. But one of the best ways which people have found and scientists have observed in their research is that meditation activates this center very quickly, and it can bring up profound and permanent structural changes in our brain. So let me give you a brief overview, like what the scientists have observed, what are the findings in the neurosciences journal these days. Scientists have observed that when they did brain scans on two sets of people, these brain scans, when I say, these are the latest scans available, and these are MRI scans, PET scans, by which you can actually measure the blood flow going in the different parts of the brain. And scientists observed that they compared the brain scan of meditators versus the non-meditators. And what they found was that in the meditators, the blood flow in the frontal part of the brain was considerably higher as compared to the non-meditator. So this can actually tell us, and not only the blood flow, but the functional activity, which we can measure by checking the electrical impulses which we are getting from the neurons. The electrical activity also was coming more from the frontal lobes in the meditators. So this is actually an evidence first time which we can create in the lab, which could see that yes, when meditators are doing meditation, the frontal lobes are more active, and their central part of the brain, which is the limbic system, technically speaking, which is responsible for the negative emotions, that starts calming down. So what are the other observations which they saw? They found that these meditators, what kind of meditation they were doing. Scientists observed that this was not specific to any particular religion. It was absolutely non-sectarian. This is because they were amazed. Scientists were amazed that this is where they found they were taking in control groups as well as in the experimental group people from all religions. They were Buddhists, they were Zen monks, they were people from Hindu religion, and so on. So what they found was that when meditators are meditating, these were simple, sometimes breathing techniques, or they were sometimes chanting a holy name, which was repetitive chanting of holy names, or sometimes, this exercise which was given to them was just, a breathing technique, a holy name, or it was subtle finger movements, very subtle finger movements. So you see, this was not something very unusual. This was very simple techniques which these meditators were following. And another, revolutionary thing which the scientists found was that as little as 12 minutes, this is very important, which they found, that even if they were doing as little as 12 minutes of meditation daily for 2 months, this was enough to bring some permanent changes in the brain. I mean, this sometimes, people come to us and they say that how much I can meditate, and I mean how difficult it is to meditate and sit for, at one place and, keep on concentrating on whatever technique we have. But you see, just to give you an encouragement, I mean, just 12 minutes, I mean, just think about how much minutes we have in our whole day. And if this is the minimum, I mean, which we should be doing, and if we do it, we can have profound results. And apart from that, what these scientists observed was that, as I'm saying, that structural changes were observed in the brain. One of the important areas of the brain, which I can again go back to the previous image that I have here, there is an important center in the brain which is known as thalamus, and which is located deep inside here. And this thalamus actually acts as a relay center. Just like you can imagine about, junction boxes which we have in our walls, which are supplying, current to different appliances. So whatever impulses, whatever, senses, whatever information senses are given to the brain, first of all that information is coming to this important structure, which is thalamus. And so this acts as a relay center. And then this relay center actually transmits all this information to the respective parts of the brain. Now, what the scientists observed was that structurally this thalamus was different in a meditator than a non-meditator. Now, this has important connotations. When we say that thalamus is changing, so what it meant for the scientists was that the perception of the surroundings, because if the impulses are relayed in a different way in a meditator as compared to a non-meditator, then it is to say that if in a given circumstances there are two people sitting, one is a meditator and another is a non-meditator, both of these people are perceiving the information differently in their brains. As a result, their responses will be different. That is why when we say that in a given set of circumstances, one person might just lose his temper, whereas the other person in the same situation can actually be very calm and cool about it. How is that going to happen? This is because the thalami of these two individuals are different. The information that is being relayed to the brain is different. As a result, their individual perceptions of the reality are different. Now, these are the basic, features, subtle points which I have touched on, and I would also like to emphasize one important topic, because apart from meditation, what are the other ways by which we can activate this frontal part of the brain? So let us see what are the other ways by which we can activate this positive center. So one of them is, I think, which Dr. Aditya covered last time, is actually music. And it is not any music, but it is spiritual music or classical music, Indian classical music. Sometimes we have data now available that how classical music can actually change the moods of the people, how the plants even respond to the classical music, the spiritually uplifting music. And the reason is that immediately that music starts affecting the frontal part of our brains. And in our subsequent talk, we will be talking something about the uplifting or an upright posture. This is very important, that how actually posture affects our health and moods. Will be taking up some of these topics in the subsequent webinars. So keeping our posture upright immediately gives the positive vibes and positive energy to the frontal lobe of the brain. Even uplifting gaze, keeping our gaze uplifted gives energy to the frontal lobes of the brain. Then one interesting way was that even just when we smile more often, smiles are the easiest way to keep your frontal parts of the brain active. And scientists observe that this time, because people used to say that, okay, smile can actually make you feel better, and now this time scientists could actually see that how neurons were making different connections when not only we smile, but we even see a smiling face. There is actually something known as mirror. Our brain actually works on the principles of mirroring. Like whatever we see, the same image creates an impression in our mind, and the brain starts creating a mirror image of it. So this is very interesting. And apart from that, affirmations. This is a very beautiful way to keep our brains, keep our frontal lobes of the brain, active. And one technique which we'll be sharing with you is actually a breathing technique, and how this simple breathing technique can uplift, can activate our frontal lobe of the brain. Dr. Aditya will be sharing with you in this workshop. And then many others, because this list is actually too big, and I just want to share with you that these are some of the topics which we'll be sharing up in this series of classes. And just to end my talk, I would say that we are actually living in an interesting era, and it is an era where yoga and science are actually coming on the same page. And before I hand it over to Dr. Aditya, I would also like to tell you that he will be sharing with you one technique. If you can just see that this part of the brain is actually very closely linked with the nose. And right here we have a small plate which separates the nose from the brain, and the way we are breathing, the air is entering through the nose and it goes directly like this and touches the frontal part of the brain. So even if we can learn a very simple technique of breathing, we can actually stimulate our frontal part of the brain. And now I'll hand over to Dr. Aditya, who will share this technique with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amarji. So friends, that was wonderful information, and as Amarji said, we will cover those topics in greater detail in future classes. But let's now spend about 5 to 6 minutes experiencing the benefits and seeing how the breath especially and our posture can affect our peace of mind. Mind you, spiritually, this point in the center of the two eyebrows is also known as the spiritual eye. It is known as the place where Yogananda ji said super consciousness can be felt. Peace, for example. Let's focus today on peace. So let's keep our spine straight. Let's take a few deep breaths in through our nose. Breathe out. Breathe in through the nose. Breathe out. And this last time, when you breathe in, behind closed eyelids, gently lift your gaze as if you're looking at a rising moon or a beautiful Himalayan mountain peak in front of you, and your gaze is uplifted. Now forget about the breath. Do not control it. But let's focus on the flow of the breath as it comes in naturally at its own pace and leaves the body. Let's first try to feel it in the form of chest movements. Notice that your chest moves out and sideways as you breathe in, and then slowly recoils. attention to the movements of the stomach and abdomen with each breath. Out and in goes the stomach. And now let's bring our attention to the nostrils and the middle part of the nose. Feel the cool air current coming in the nose, after a while the warm current going out. Make sure your gaze is upwards and the spine straight, chest open. Now try to feel the subtle air currents high up in the nose, where the nose meets the forehead. Feel the incoming air current and outgoing air current there. Blowing air in the center of your forehead, just behind which is the prefrontal lobe. And there are small nerves which go from the roof of the nose into that part of the brain, surrounding part of the brain there. This simple exercise of observing the breath at that point brings great inner peace by awakening the prefrontal lobe. This is also an excellent exercise to develop concentration, proper decision making, intuition and foresight, which are all the functions of the prefrontal lobe. So let's now sit in silence about 3 minutes, feeling the air currents at this high point in the nose. While continuing to focus on the air at that point, also appreciate the pauses between the breath. It is in these pauses that deep rest and peace is to be found. Now let's take a breath in through our nose and breathe out 3 times from the mouth. Let's slowly open our eyes. So this was a very small practice, friends, but you can see how, as Amarji mentioned, even 12 minutes a day, twice a day, can make profound changes in the very structure of the brain. So let's see how we can include these practices during our day. And in the next class we will have at the same time, following week, we will be talking about a proper posture, a proper spine for greater health. And that again, as you can guess, is related to our nervous system, this time the spinal cord and the so many nerves that come out from the spine. And Amarji and I will talk about it and suggest some postural changes. And again, we will take this topic deeper. So have a beautiful week ahead of you. God bless you.